Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Almaz Sahille Natural Processed Ethiopia from Koppi Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Koppi, based out of Helsingborg, Sweden. And they're a roaster that appears pretty regularly on this channel due to the fact that their coffee is quite easily accessible. This coffee caught my interest though because I rarely see Koppi offering a lot of natural processed coffees. So when I saw this coffee, it's something that definitely caught my interest, mostly due to the fact that my chief complaint with some of Koppi's coffees that I haven't liked has been that they've come out a little more tame than I like. So I've always wondered what would happen if they did have a natural processed coffee that we did review. So this is that opportunity to finally test that theory out. This right here is day 38 of this coffee. And recipe we went with for this coffee was a 16.67 to 1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 93 degrees Celsius, about 199 degrees Fahrenheit, and I like this one best through the Chemex, which of course indicates a more medium grind. Koppi is a Nordic light for the roast profile. With that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 13, first impression. Started a little early, but was seeing what I could get from this coffee, and it radiated a strong orange aroma and so many natural qualities, including this very syrupy berry right off the bat. The cup was on the slightly cleaner side while radiating strong natural intensity potential. So my biggest concern was that this coffee was going to be a overly murky natural processed coffee, because that's just kind of the potential it had, despite the fact that it was a little more clean than I think I was expecting going into it. So right off the bat, it kind of neutralized that whole coffees can come out a little tame with Koppi theory, as this one right here was quite vibrant, quite nice. It left a positive first impression. I was just a little concerned it might skew a little too heavy in the more boozy direction. Day 15, cup didn't feel as clean on this day, and that theory was already proven to be correct, as the berry really seemed to be heavy in this cup. It was the significant factor, the most prominent and pronounced factor, as it was the much more heavy and robust berry within it. It does settle off with a slightly sweeter citrus, justifying that orange note that they have listed on here. And that's something I really liked, was that the citrus in this was a much more sweet citrus as opposed to a much more, well, for lack of a better term, citric citrus. That was the best part of this coffee, but I was already starting to feel a little bit of the fermenty aspects in it. So my objective from this point going forward was to make sure that the cup didn't skew even more in that direction. Day 17, cup remains mostly consistent, however it is continuing to skew a little bit more in terms of that heavy natural direction. Decided to lower the temperatures and decrease the ratio, so started off a pretty standard recipe, of course, which is a little bit more concentrated and some higher temperatures, but said really want to kind of tone down the vibrancy that is continuously increasing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and in this case, it was better with lower temperatures. Best way I could describe this coffee was a, strong berry compote. I misspelled strong on the notes here, but strong berry compote, as it was quite syrupy, quite heavy. It was very sugary, very sweet. It was very intense overall, just very concentrated sort of berry component. Not quite as clean, fresh blueberries, but rather much more of a sugary one. Slight increase in the cleanliness with adjustments, so I said we might be on the right path, as a lot more of the fermentiness kind of died down with this. Day 25, due to the fact that I was in Denver for a little bit, took that trip, lowered the temperatures, and ran it through the Chemex, and this right here was significantly better. The berry aspects seem to have increased in vibrancy with the extended rest, but the cup as a whole just came out a little cleaner. And this is when I settled on this recipe really working, because the lower concentration as well as the lower temperatures really seemed to give the coffee a little bit of room to maybe kind of settle as a whole. Day 27, tried that again, much cleaner, much more even at this point, and I was really liking the way that this coffee was coming out, because the early impressions were this coffee could be on the cleaner side of things, and this definitely demonstrated that, as so much of the fermenty aspects were dialed back, and you were getting much more of a clean berry component to it, complemented by that really nice sweet citrus that I liked right from the start. So great in terms of the sweetness, great in terms of the flavor profile, and much better in terms of the clarity. Day 29, best day of the coffee to this point, as I'm continuing to persist with the same sort of brew method, same sort of results, as the sweeter citrus continues to contrast the vibrancy within the cup of coffee. Moderately clean, just better overall. Adjustments seem to help this coffee trend in the right direction. The time seems to be helping this coffee trend in the right direction, so everything's going in a positive way. And then day 31, same thing, but I was getting a slight bit of grain. That was also consistent, something I haven't necessarily noted throughout, but there were definitely some times I got a little bit of that graining quality that is quite common in coffee. Berry compote on the forefront yet again before settling into a more semi-sweet citric aspect. Slight bit of sugary stone fruit I was able to pull out from the cup of coffee, which was quite nice, an added characteristic that I wasn't necessarily expecting, and the cup as a whole, which once upon a time was a little too heavy and robust for me, definitely dialed back and a much more palatable experience. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we were getting. All right, 3 level 4, so let's go through those real quick. The finish, level 4, it does have it's a slightly more citric finish for me. Even though the coffee is a little bit more heavy on the berry components themselves, it does seem to finish off in this slightly sweet citric component, which is the best part of this coffee for me. In addition to the fact that I actually kind of like the heaviness of the blueberry when it comes out a little bit more clean. So the main components that they were going for in this coffee, I think ended up coming out really nice. Sweetness, level 4. So as I've said before, oftentimes I can kind of have issues with Koppi's coffees because their sweetness can remain in that level 3 or 2 mark, but the natural components in this definitely helped skew that up a little higher, and I really like the sweetness, and it's one of the more sweet cups of coffee I've had from Koppi. The only one I can think that was maybe on par was that Ethiopia I enjoyed from last year's Advent Calendar. Wonderful cup of coffee, that one. Berry fruit, level 4. As I've mentioned, by far the most pronounced characteristic. Very berry compote, like much more of a mixed berry compote, but I could also see a slightly more sugary, like berry concentrate, blueberry concentrate. Think maybe like blueberry syrup sort of thing. Citrus fruit, level 3. I've said before, that's my favorite part of this coffee because it is a sweeter citrus, so I really like the citrus within this cup of coffee. Mentioned as well a slight bit of stone fruits. The acidity's not too bad. It's a pretty even level acidity. And then the 2 other things we must discuss. Body, level 3, that's interesting. Really like this coffee most through the Chemex, so even then it does have a little bit more texture, a little bit more body to it. So with other brew methods you can expect maybe even more body than that, but it's quite medium bodied, so that's nice in that sense. And then the cleanliness, level 3, I think that's really good. Most of these natural processed coffees tend to kind of fall in the 2 category, or if I'm being overly harsh, it's kind of on the higher side of level 2, lower side of the level 3, but this one right here is a solid level 3. I think with the adjustments I made, I definitely got some great clarity for it, and if I was being super generous, you could say lower side of level 4, higher side of level 3, but I think it's like the epitome of what you would expect or hope for from a natural. Great vibrancy, while still enough cleanliness that it doesn't murk the coffee as a whole. All right, my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, pretty positive actually. I had some issues in the earlier stages of this coffee, but once I worked through them, I really liked the way that this coffee came out in terms of the balance between the natural cleanliness as well as the natural sweetness and vibrancy, because we were kind of towing that line where it definitely had so much of those vibrant components while at the same time maintaining enough clarity, which is a nice selling point to me. And I think a lot of people love those berry components to them. I always did, but it's not worth the trade-off of having a really murky cup of coffee. So this one kept the balance really close. I could say it can be a little fermenty ever so slightly, hence the reason it's not a level 4. Ideally, I would like minimum level 4 for all of my coffees for cleanliness, but even then, I think it did a really good job of keeping the balance between those 2 things. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to, if you really like your naturals but have been a little turned off by the more heavy naturals, the more fermenty, more boozy naturals, then I think this one's a really good fit because it still has a lot of those vibrant components that we all look for in naturals, while at the same time having a little bit more of that clarity that we would also ideally like that seems to have been lost within the last couple of years. So I think Koppi did a really nice job of this coffee. One of the better natural processed Ethiopian coffees I've had this year, so kudos to them for this one. I quite enjoyed it. I think for the most part though, I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, would love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you enjoyed the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Almaz Sahille natural processed Ethiopia from Koppi Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.